Welcome to 15 Minutes Health, your source for clear, evidence-based insights in nutrition, neuroscience, longevity, and everyday wellness. Each video delivers science you can trust, designed to help you build a stronger, healthier life, all in under 15 minutes. Subscribe to the channel so you never miss practical, science-backed tools that can improve your health for the rest of your life.
There's this one variable that has a massive impact on your physiology. Everything from your hormones and immune system to your ability to focus and even how long you live. And no, it's not a new diet or a supplement or some fancy workout plan. It's the quality of the people in your inner circle. We tend to think of relationships as a soft skill, right? Something for the psychology books. But a ton of scientific research now confirms that your relationships are actually powerful biological events. They're a constant input that's shaping your nervous system, determining if you spend your days feeling calm and clear or in a state of chronic low-grade stress. So in this explainer, we're going to dig into the exact biological and neurological mechanisms that run human connection. We'll start by looking at a subconscious process called neuroception. Think of it as your nervous system's built-in gatekeeper, always scanning people for safety or danger. Then we'll explore why our social circles tend to get smaller as we get older, and how that's actually a sign of healthy biological fine-tuning. And from there, we get to the practical tools. We're going to lay out a clear blueprint for what a stable, high-value relationship looks like to your nervous system, and I'll give you a set of science-backed protocols you can use to intentionally observe, test, and build an inner circle that's a biological asset, not a biological tax on your system. To really get just how critical this is, let's start with a hard number, 50%. So, a huge 2010 meta-analysis, led by researcher Julianne Holt-Lunstad, looked at data from 148 different studies. That's over 300,000 people. And what they found was staggering. Individuals with strong, healthy social connections had a 50% increased likelihood of survival. This isn't just a small psychological boost, it's a massive physiological effect. It puts social connection in the same league as the other major factors that determine mortality. This isn't just about feeling happy, it's a fundamental biological need. Why? Because strong social ties act as a buffer for your body's stress response systems, especially that HPA axis, reducing the chronic wear and tear that leads to things like heart disease, a weakened immune system, and even faster aging at the cellular level. And to put that 50% number into perspective, let's compare it to other health advice we all know. As you can see, the protective effect of strong social connection is on par with quitting a 15-cigarette-a-day smoking habit. And get this, its effect on reducing mortality risk was actually greater than that of regular exercise or maintaining a healthy body weight. That is a profound biological reality. Think about it. A chronically stressful or unpredictable relationship acts like a constant low-grade biological threat, a lot like the chemical stress of smoking. It keeps your cortisol levels high, which is fine in the short term, but corrosive over the long haul. It ramps up inflammation and puts a heavy load on your body, forcing it to stay in a state of high alert. On the flip side, supportive, stable relationships trigger the release of things like oxytocin, which calms your nervous system, creating a biological state of safety where your body can actually focus on growth, repair, and higher-level thinking instead of just surviving. So here's the crucial point. If relationships have this big of a biological impact, it only makes sense that we should approach them with the same intention and care as we do our nutrition or our training, right? We don't just leave our diet or our fitness up to chance. We shouldn't leave our inner circle to chance either. And that brings us to the big question we're going to spend the rest of our time on. How do we go from just passively accepting whatever relationships come our way to actively, intentionally curating a small, high-value inner circle that biologically supports our health? This is so critical because our default settings for who we connect with are often shaped by our early life experiences, not by what's actually good for our adult physiology. So we have to consciously use the analytical parts of our brain, like the prefrontal cortex, to really assess and sometimes override those older automatic patterns. So here's our roadmap. We're going to start at the most basic level, the brain's automatic social network, and a really critical process called neuroception. Then we'll see how this system gets naturally refined through what we'll call the maturation filter. After that, we'll lay out the blueprint for a stable connection and identify the specific, observable, high-value traits your nervous system is always on the lookout for. And finally, we'll translate all of this science into a practical set of tools and protocols you can start using today to build your own inner circle. All right, our first section is all about a fundamental process that's running 24/7 in the background, shaping every single social interaction you have, often before you've even had a conscious thought. This is the brain's ancient automatic system for sizing people up. It's your subconscious gatekeeper, and understanding how it works is the first step toward making better relational choices. The key mechanism here is a process called neuroception. This term was coined by Dr. Stephen Porges, who developed the polyvagal theory. Basically, neuroception is your nervous system's ability to figure out if people or situations are safe, dangerous, or life-threatening. And this all happens automatically, way below the level of conscious thought. It's the biological reason we have a gut feeling or get a certain vibe from someone. This process is handled by the more primitive parts of your brain, like the brainstem and limbic system, and it works way faster than your logical, analytical prefrontal cortex. It's really an ancient survival circuit, designed to make instant judgments about friend or foe, because back in our tribal past, a quick social assessment could literally mean life or death.
So what exactly is this subconscious scan looking for? Well, it's hunting for a very specific set of biological cues. First, it evaluates vocal tone. Your ear is incredibly tuned to the frequencies in the human voice. A calm, melodic tone signals safety and switches on your social engagement system. On the other hand, a harsh, sharp, or monotone voice can be subconsciously tagged as a threat. Second, it reads facial expressions, especially those tiny muscles around the eyes and mouth, to tell the difference between a genuine warm smile and a fake one. Third, and this is a huge one, it assesses predictability. Your brain is a prediction machine. It loves patterns because they mean safety. When someone's words and actions consistently line up over time, it calms your nervous system right down. Inconsistency and unpredictability, that fires up the threat detection circuits in your amygdala. And finally, it gauges a person's overall emotional energy or nervous system state. Your nervous system can literally sense if someone else is calm and grounded or agitated and chaotic, and it will often start to mirror that state.
So this subconscious scan basically leads to one of two distinct biological states. When your neuroception picks up on cues of safety and predictability, like a warm voice and consistent actions, it activates your parasympathetic nervous system. This is your rest and digest state, but it's also your social engagement state. Your heart rate slows, your breathing gets deeper, and you feel calm, clear, and open to connection. This is the physiological state you need to be in for trust and intimacy to actually form. But when your neuroception detects threat or unpredictability, a harsh tone, inconsistent behavior, it triggers your sympathetic nervous system, your fight or flight response. Your body gets a rush of adrenaline and cortisol, your heart rate speeds up, and your brain pulls resources away from social engagement and funnels them toward survival. This leaves you feeling stressed, anxious, and wanting to pull away. And a person who consistently puts you in that state is, by definition, dysregulating your system.
Okay, let's move on and see how the system gets refined over time. There's this common thing that happens as we get older. Our big social circles starts to shrink, and we end up with fewer but deeper friendships. Now, a lot of people see this as a bad thing, like they're becoming isolated or antisocial, but from a biological and neurological point of view, this is often a sign of healthy alignment and optimization.
To get this, we have to look at the link between your identity and how much dissonance you can tolerate. As you mature, the front part of your brain gets much better at building a stable identity, a clear sense of your core values, your standards, and where you want to go in life. And this new clarity acts like a really powerful filter. Once you have a more defined sense of self, your nervous system gets way more sensitive to misalignment. That chronic low-grade biological stress you feel from relationships that don't match your values, it becomes much more obvious. Relationships that you might have put up with before, maybe because you weren't fully aware of the subtle stress they were causing, now feel glaringly wrong. That inconsistency, those mismatched values, the stuff your neuroception was picking up on all along, is now impossible for your conscious mind to ignore. So you naturally start moving toward people who feel coherent with who you are and pulling away from those who create that internal friction.
This quote really captures the biological drive at play here. Your entire system, your mind and your body, is always searching for a state of balance or coherence. A relationship that's fundamentally out of sync with your values, or one that consistently triggers a stress response, is a source of chronic biological incoherence. Your body simply can't sustain that long-term without consequences like burnout, anxiety, or even physical illness. So a shrinking social circle isn't a social failure. It's an act of biological self-preservation. It's your system's intelligent way of shedding sources of chronic stress to save energy and move toward a more stable, integrated, and healthy state.
Okay, so if getting older involves filtering for what feels coherent, what does a coherent, stable, high-value relationship actually look like on a structural level? This brings us to the blueprint for connection. These are the three core pillars that create the predictability and safety that your nervous system is fundamentally wired to look for in your closest relationships. Getting these three pillars right is the foundation. The three pillars are shared values, mutual standards, and aligned direction. First up, shared values. And look, these aren't just beliefs you talk about. They are predictors of behavior, especially when things get tough.
When your core values like integrity or accountability or kindness match someone else's, their behavior becomes predictable to you, and that predictability creates deep neurological safety. Second, mutual standards. These are the agreed-upon rules of engagement. How do you both agree to handle conflict, communication, repairing things when they go wrong? When the standards are clear, mutual, and upheld, the relationship feels incredibly stable and safe. And third, aligned direction. This doesn't mean you have to have the exact same life goals. It just means there's a sense of mutual growth and moving forward. When one person is actively growing and the other is stagnant or moving in the opposite direction, it creates an instability that the nervous system reads as a potential threat.
This is a really critical idea to let sink in. Over the long haul, there's no such thing as a neutral relationship in your inner circle. Every significant interaction is either strengthening your sense of self and co-regulating your nervous system into a state of safety, or it's weakening your identity and dysregulating your nervous system into a state of threat. A regulating relationship, built on those three pillars, reinforces your values and helps you feel more grounded. A dysregulating one creates internal friction and forces your system to constantly burn energy just managing the stress of that misalignment. And that's why curating your inner circle is a biological necessity. These people are actively shaping your physiology and psychology every single day. Now that we have the big picture blueprint, let's zoom in and get even more specific. What are the actual observable behaviors that signal to your neuroceptive pathways that a person is safe, stable, and a good candidate for your inner circle? These are the biological signals of safety that your subconscious is always looking for and that you can now learn to consciously observe.
Let's break down these traits. First, regulation. A regulated person has a stable emotional baseline. Their voice is steady, their reactions fit the situation. Their calm state can actually help co-regulate your own nervous system. An unregulated person, on the other hand, is emotionally volatile, big mood swings, overreactions, which signals danger and flips on your stress response. Second, accountability. When there's a conflict, a high-value person takes ownership and tries to repair the connection. This active repair neurologically closes the loop on the conflict, turning off the threat centers and restoring safety. Someone who just blames or makes excuses leaves that loop open, keeping your nervous system in a state of unresolved tension. Third, boundaries. A secure person sees a boundary as just useful information for keeping the connection healthy. They respect it. A dysregulated person feels a boundary as a personal rejection, which can activate the same brain regions as physical pain. Their defensive reaction is a huge red flag for emotional immaturity. Fourth, integrity. This is simply when words and actions match up. Remember, predictability is the currency of neurological safety. When someone consistently does what they say they'll do, it calms the amygdala. Inconsistency does the opposite. It forces your brain to waste energy on threat assessment. And finally, elevation. A high-value person is genuinely happy for your growth and celebrates your wins. This creates a positive feedback loop. Someone who competes with you or resents your success introduces social threat and activates circuits related to social pain and anxiety. Okay, so we've covered the core mechanisms, how your nervous system scans people, why your circle shrinks as you mature, the 3 pillars of connection, and the 5 key traits of a safe person. Now, we're going to pivot to the most practical part. How do you actually apply this knowledge? Let's move from the theory to the actionable tools and protocols for intentionally building a better inner circle. The first and most important tool is the observation phase. Look, when you first meet someone, there's this powerful neurochemical cocktail that makes you want to project a whole future relationship onto them. This tool is about consciously resisting that urge. For the first several weeks, even months, your main goal is data collection, not attachment. Think of yourself as a scientist. Your hypothesis is that this person might be a good fit. Now your job is to gather data. Observe them neutrally. Do they follow through on little things, like sending an article they mentioned? That shows integrity. How do they treat a waiter? That shows their baseline empathy. How do they react to minor stressors, like traffic? That reveals their emotional regulation. The goal here is to establish a clear baseline pattern of their behavior over time, before you give them deep access to your life. You're letting their consistent actions, not their words, be the data. Okay, after you've observed for a bit, you can gather more specific data using 3 low-stakes tests. And these are not traps, they are just natural interactions that reveal a ton about a person's emotional maturity. First is the boundary test. This is where you express a small preference or limit. Something like, hey, I can't talk right now, but can I call you back in an hour? Or, I'm really trying to protect my sleep so I don't text late at night. The key is not whether they comply, but their reaction. A regulated person will just say, okay, sounds good. It's neutral information to them. A dysregulated person might get defensive, push back, or try to guilt trip you. Their reaction is a direct window into their emotional maturity.
Second is the stress test. This is just about observing them during naturally stressful moments, a missed deadline, a tough conversation, or even a wrong order at a restaurant. Do they escalate and blame, or do they stay calm and problem solve? Stress reveals the real patterns underneath the social mask. And third is the reciprocity test. Over a few weeks, just notice the balance. Is the effort, the initiation, the emotional support roughly equal? Or are you consistently doing most of the work? A long-term imbalance is a clear sign the relationship is going to be an energy drain on your system.
Now, as you start to use these tools, you might run into some resistance inside your own head because of a few common cultural myths. Let's tackle those head on. The first myth is that a smaller circle is isolating. The biological reality is that it's relational refinement. It's an optimization process where you're shedding sources of neurological stress to create a healthier ecosystem for yourself. The second myth, boundaries create distance. The truth, boundaries actually reveal who is capable of true closeness. People who can hear and respect your boundaries are the same people who can handle the vulnerability and honesty that real intimacy requires. And finally, there's this idea that we should help everyone equally. While compassion is great, your nervous system has a finite capacity. It wasn't designed for emotional open borders. For you to be stable, healthy, and perform at your best, it requires a carefully curated set of connections that are regulating, predictable, and safe.
So let's quickly summarize the key principles we've covered. First, your nervous system, through neuroception, is constantly and subconsciously categorizing people as safe or threatening. You can learn to listen to this. Second, as you mature, your tolerance for mismatched relationships goes down, which leads to a natural and healthy refining of your social circle. This is a feature, not a bug. Third, the most stable, nourishing relationships are built on observable traits: emotional regulation, accountability, integrity, and mutual elevation. Fourth, you can shift from being passive to being an active curator by using tools like the observation phase and small tests to gather real-world data. And finally, and most importantly, this whole process isn't selfish. It is a fundamental act of biological self-preservation, just as critical as managing your diet, exercise, or sleep.
And that brings us to the ultimate takeaway here. We have to fundamentally reframe how we think about human connection. Our relationships are not just social conveniences or pleasant distractions. Your closest relationships are powerful biological regulators. They are a primary input to your nervous system that is either moving you toward health, resilience, and high performance, or taxing your system and moving you toward chronic stress, inflammation, and burnout. The people you allow into your inner circle are quite literally co-authors of your biological and psychological state. Choosing them with intention is one of the most powerful health interventions you can possibly make.
So I'll leave you with one final question to really think about. Take a moment and consider the handful of people you give the most time, energy, and access to. Based on the principles we've discussed today, based on how your body and your nervous system actually feel when you're with them and after you leave, is your current inner circle a biological asset, actively contributing to your health and growth? Or is it a biological tax, draining your precious resources and holding you back? The answer to that question has profound implications for every single aspect of your life. And by understanding the mechanisms and using the tools, you give yourself the power to make sure it's the former. And that is a process worth your full attention.
Thanks for watching 15 Minutes Health. If this video helped you, consider subscribing. Your support allows us to keep creating clear, science-backed content to help you stay healthier, stronger, and better informed. See you in the next video.